Okay, so we're putting this fucking transmission back together, and we're going to show you how that goes. I'm sure we're going to run into shit where I'm not going to be able to do something, but we're just going to have a go at it. This is if you don't have an alignment tool for the pump, you can flip the pump upside down and use the case, and that's what I'm doing right here because I couldn't find a band clamp to use to line it up, so we're doing it this way. The holes are offset, so like they're not exactly equally spaced apart. There's different spaces, and then once you find the holes, there is some major spots you can use, like this 90-degree bend here is right here. I'm checking for my clutch stack clearances just to make sure that we have adequate clearance for the clutches. You want to be between roughly 28 thousandths to 40 thousandths. It could be wider on factory specs, but things get tightened up for performance reasons. Those numbers might be a little off there. They were off of memory there, so always reference your workbooks. So I'm installing the clutches here. These are the low reverse clutches, and you usually alternate them between a steel and a friction. Normally your frictions you dip in transmission fluid and you let them soak up. Since this transmission's already been running, there's no need to do that, so you guys don't see a pan full of trans fluid there with me pulling clutches out. Right now I'm installing the snap ring for the center support. A common upgrade for the center support on a Turbo 350 is to use one from a 700R4. There is upgraded ones, but you can find the 700R4 center supports pretty cheap, 20-25 bucks, and it's a cheap upgrade. It's wider, so it spreads out the shock load a little bit better, and it's a good little upgrade to do on the Turbo 350s. I unfortunately don't do this enough to like know what the fuck I'm doing, so I still always have to resort to this one. Sucks because what happens is these clutches are lined up all like parallel, and they have to drop into that reaction carrier because they slide into here, and then you got tabs here, so you fight everything. There's like one, and then there's a little off. As long as I line this up, pretty good. Oh, I fucked that up. The shitty part is literally there's no tool for this job. This is literally how you have to do it. I'm sure guys who do this shit all the time do it like a lot better. There we go. Let's really see that now. You can see the bad part about it is this is an open-ended wave cushion, and it does ride on here while the open end of the wave spring cuts into this. And luckily I got a graveyard in the basement from another transmission from mine. This is split. It's the way it's designed to be. This one's a one piece off of an older transmission, so this should live a lot happier in there. So these are junk. So that's probably what all that shrapnel in the transmission was. Is that. That's all gouged up. And the only thing that rides there is this cushion spring. So when this thing was turning in there, it was cutting it up. And you can feel on the shiny surfaces here how rough it is, where it was biting on the, it was starting to grind away at the cushion spring. So all these shiny spots, they're supposed to be there, but they're all rough. Mystery salt. I'm just going to make sure that all these bolt holes line up, because this is an aluminum case and you don't want to be using your threads to line up the pump. So like, I got 2 bolts that fit in there. Okay, that fits in there. And these 2 that are adjacent to each other fit in there, so the rest should line up. There we go. Speed wrench. I use it a lot when I build engines or transmissions, especially for areas where you don't want to be using power tools. You guys probably saw me using that 1/4-inch snap-on impact on the pump half. It's a cast iron body. If you over tighten it, nothing's really going to happen unless your gears are too tight and you squish them out, which again, I checked for pump movement before I put it in. Everything moved fine, nothing was binding. I drove all these bolts down and we are going to torque it down right now. So what I'm checking here is the end play. There's selective washers underneath the needle thrust bearing in here. And it was really sloppy before. We put in there 2 shims and it really tightened it up. You're only supposed to have between 10 thou and 30 thou of end play. So we tightened it up significantly. It was a lot worse before. All right, these go to 20 foot-pounds. Okay. And as mentioned before, I have a ball check to put in there, which goes in this passage right here. And then we have our separator plate that's going to go on. And this is going to kind of suck because it's on an angle. It's going to want to slide. And as you see, I got fluid on there, but that doesn't matter. And this is the throttle. This is the throttle valve. This is what controls the kick down. But you got multiple valves, all controlling different fluid passages that lines up to. And that's the brains of the transmission. So when guys put in a shift kit, it reprograms this to eliminate certain circuits, because as you saw in some of those diagrams, sometimes when you're in like low first, you could be controlling another circuit and you lose line pressure. So most shift kits offer a hard shift, more clutch apply, but it's through reprogramming. So this separator plate is unique to this shift kit. And it's to reprogram the transmission to avoid soggy shifts, where there is, per design, a certain amount of slippage they allow through like controlled cross leaks within the transmission. So got to make sure that I got a couple bolts in there, and from here, like, you got to make sure, like, this is, a lot of people ask, like, So guys will do these shift kits in the car, and the transmission's upright, and stuff wants to fall out, and it gets harder when you do it in the car. So this manual link, this is stupid simple. This S-link will not go through the manual valve, and there's a stop for it. There's no way you could screw that up. Now, another thing on a transmission, I recently built this rooster tail was rounded off. It's common in Midwest cars when you go back and forth and jam it between reverse and drive and you get stuck in the snow. Let's put the spring on there. So, of course, one of the bolts that I use for alignment is the one. So you can see this has an offset, and it's as it tightens down, it puts spring load tension. This is like spring steel. It puts tension on the rooster, so you get those clicks, and you can't overshift it. There's a spring. So this is also unique to the B&M kits. You got a silver and a gold plate. This changes the direction of the fluid, and this is what I'm talking about, where they reprogrammed the transmission to eliminate certain softness that GM actually engineered into these transmissions. So they actually are taking away from some of that stuff that's not ideal for high performance applications. And actually, it's not ideal at all for any car. It's just they designed it that way because customers don't want to get into their new car and second gear snaps their neck off. All right, so you see I got some bolts here that don't match. This is an aluminum case. I've had this transmission apart various times. The very first time I put it together, it had some soft threads. You're supposed to torque these down to like 20 foot-pounds, 15 foot-pounds, something like that. It's pretty much just, don't fucking go crazy. It's aluminum. You know when it's tight. I got a few bolts here that don't look anything like what they look like. I actually got a metric one in here because it worked out good. At this point, if this transmission comes apart again, I'm going to have to rethread these, which the trick of mine is whenever that happens is upsize to the next metric bolt. And you don't have to use like a Healy coil. I pulled apart transmissions where they Healy coil them, and I don't understand why they just don't go to metric. It's like blasphemy for people to do that, but dude, Healy coils suck. So if you're working on your transmission and you get a bolt that strips out somewhere, you can go to a metric size. Just go to the right, diameter, and there's a chart, and you can do that and not obliterate your case if you thread it. All right. God damn it. Who fucking put a metric socket in there? So it's pretty much center out on this thing. This is like 12 foot-pounds. It's barely like anything. Now you see I got no particular pattern because I've worked my way from the center out. Now I'm going to check them all. Up, down, down, up, as I work my way towards the back because they bolts, 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 bolts. So I'm stuck using this gasket again, but it's no big deal. You want to make sure this is in the right spot because these are offset. So pay attention to your offset. .5/16. What the hell was I doing with a 5/16? So filters on. This is pretty much, make sure everything works. Let's park. Good. Rotates. Everything's nice. Everything's tight. So we're going to go ahead and just put a couple of bolts on our Chinesium pan. And you never want to use a power tool when you do your final installation. For this, 4 corners, snug it down, couple nuggets, done. So from here, we need to, oh, this bitch is heavy now.
Keep in mind these transmissions are about 120 pounds. If you don't have a good back, I don't suggest you doing it on your own. My back's not good. Okay. This retainer has to go in first. So that's the only quirk to it. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if these slots... Okay. So our speedometer gear is in there. And let's take the seal out. It's really, if your tail housing leaks here, you got problems. You shouldn't. I've seen guys put RTV. This one had RTV here. You shouldn't. This is a square cut seal. It does a great job of sealing. It compresses in there. You shouldn't need to put RTV like they had in here. This is a good seal, good design. So I already kind of cleaned this up. All right. So there's studs on these transmissions, and they're usually for like exhaust brackets and shit that mounts to the back. I really don't care, so I'm just gonna go ahead and put them in short side out. Pick any side, it doesn't really matter. You're not gonna hit anything. Again, you are screwing into aluminum. This is a bit of a bigger bolt. And you do want to squish that seal just a little bit, but you don't want to pull the threads out of this fucking thing. So, okay. That's done. So grab our speedometer. Other end of the speedometer, I should say. Alright, so the reason why these fail is there's an O-ring in there, right? And over time that O-ring gets hard. It melts away the plastic and it grooves this. And then once that happens, it'll leak. So, and it'll come out through here. And this happens all the time. You park it over the winter, stuff expands and contracts. Next thing you know, you got like 2 quarts of trains fluid on the floor. That's why that happens over the winter. So you can already tell it came pre-greased. It left a little line there. That's exactly where they wear out. That's where that seal rides. It's pretty much ready to install. And so keep in mind when you install your Speedo, this is how it's supposed to get put on. It's got 2 notches in there. That's a different size. Is it this guy? No. All right, let's consult our old transmission parts. All right, so the speedometer bolt must have been stripped and they went up one size. They didn't metric me, they upsized me. So it's a 5/16 thread, or 5/16 bolt, diameter bolt. So I'm gonna have to open this up, which of course all those tools I have at work, because I rarely need to like ream out holes here. And I rarely don't do that at work. I just use it to actually trim plastic pieces. So I'm going to have to hog this out just a little bit. And that's pretty much it, man. Well, there you have it. And with any project, I ran into a problem where I can't completely get it done. Much like mounting the body, this bolt hole, slightly different diameter. So I'm going to have to open up the speedometer, hold down. No big deal. 2-minute job. I just don't have the tool here. I'm going to take it into work tomorrow and put 1 bolt in, and our transmission is pretty much done. So that's a wrap for today's work. Transmission's done.